Listen up, Democrats. You are fake news. And lies and facts. Save our democracy from right-wing hypocrisy. We keep our integrity, embrace our diversity. Whatever we're down, we always come back. So listen up, Democrats.
Hello, welcome to Progressive Oregon, a weekly engagement broadcast on progressive issues in Oregon. My name is Larry Taylor, and I'm here today with my co-host, Betsy Cunningham. If you would like to ask questions during the show, go to the Uphill Media channel on YouTube and type in your questions in the chat window, and Betsy will do her best to relay them to us, and we will get them answered. Today we have an update on the Q2 meeting of the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon. What we'll be going through is what happened at the meeting. We're going to be explaining plurality voting because that's one of the big issues that's causing contention. We'll be talking about the bylaws and rules violations so we get the narrative right on what's been happening. I'll be dispelling some myths that are flying around, mostly about me. We'll be talking about the top shocking moments of the meeting, and it is jaw-dropping what happened. And then we'll talk about next steps on what we can do to get the Democratic Party back on track. And then lastly, we'll talk about a grievance process for the Democratic Party of Oregon. We still have character assassination and harassment going on. We don't need to tolerate this anymore, so we have a process for reporting it and getting it addressed. So what happened last weekend on May 18th and 19th? Approximately 150 delegates, staff, and assorted other followers drove from all over the state of Oregon to Prineville in Crook County to attend the quarterly meeting of the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon. The State Central Committee is the governing body, and they're supposed to be making all the decisions that happen within the party, and so it should be a big deal. And if you don't know where Prineville is, a majority of the delegates spent at least 3.5 hours to drive there, and most people stayed overnight. So it was a big investment of time and money. Why you should care about what happened. So if you were involved with the Democratic Party of Oregon, your rights were taken away regarding the most important document the party created in this biennium. And this is the plan for selecting the delegates who will attend the 2020 Democratic National Convention to select their nominee to run against Donald Trump and potentially run the country for the subsequent 4 years. This delegate selection plan is a big deal, and it needs to be done correctly. Why you should be happy about the Democratic Party. So there was a large contingent of delegates who attended and attempted to regain control over the actions of the party from the leadership who had been egregiously violating the bylaws and the rules of order in an attempt to ram through a delegate selection plan that was created by a side committee. So what did happen at the meeting? The primary accomplishment of the meeting was the passage of a motion to censure the chair for bullying a member who had attempted to call attention to the violations of the rules and bylaws, that member being me. And a number of people realized that the bullying had to stop before regular business of the Democratic Party of Oregon can proceed. Because unless people can get the truth and freely talk to each other without being attacked, then the party is just going to be dominated by the leadership and not run as a democratic institution. We have a clip of the censure motion being presented at the beginning of the meeting. John, can we show that?
Yep, give me 1 second here.
And just so you know, we have all of well, not all, about 4 hours of the meeting posted at advancementofdemocracy.org. So if you would like to watch the whole meeting roll out and how we spend our time, it's out there for your viewing.
Right.
So this is a clip of Albert Lee making the motion at the beginning of the meeting for censure.
Hang on, we got to make sure we don't have that running. All right, here we go.
Yes, I move to censure the chair for publicly bullying a member of this delegation.
I'm going to call your motion out of order. We can address that later.
I appeal the decision of the chair.
So that's about all we need to show of this. There was a good 30 minutes of the meeting spent with the presiding officer conferring with the parliamentarian because presiding at meetings is not a commonly owned skill set. What happened was that the chair said, I'm going to give my report and then you can make your motion. So Albert Lee sat down, she finished her report, then he came back up and made the motion, and then he spoke to it. And then Valdez Bravo also spoke in favor of the motion. And then we started plunging into parliamentary procedure for the next 4 hours or so. The meeting started at 1:15, and usually the approval of the agenda is something that happens early in the meeting. We approved the agenda for the meeting at 5 o'clock. And the meeting ended at 5:15 or 6:15 because we had to be out of the gym by 6:30. There was one other piece of business that happened, and that was the election of the at-large delegates to the executive committee, but that was really a nit. And we're actually going to talk about that because that ties in with the whole discussion of plurality voting. Back to bullying, after the motion to censure was made, about an hour later, the chair came up and said, I'm going to accept the censure so we can move forward. And there was a lot of wrangling over how to handle that comment from the chair. But then another 30 minutes later, she said, but I do not accept that I was bullying. So just to be clear, in cases of harassment, which is what this was, whether or not it was bullying is from the perspective of the recipient, not of the perpetrator. So she doesn't get to say that she's not bullying because she was. And it was cyberbullying. It was sending out messages using the Democratic Party of Oregon mailing lists, which only she has access to, questioning my motives, naming me by name. And there were at least 3 sent out, and then it continued on Saturday during a bunch of committee meetings. So why you should be concerned is because of the violation of the rights of the members of the State Central Committee. Like I said earlier, the State Central Committee is the alleged governing body, and they should be doing things like approving the delegate selection plan. But the State Central Committee was not allowed to debate, amend, or vote on the delegate selection plan before it was submitted to the Democratic National Committee. The plan was not written by the Rules Committee as stipulated in the bylaws. The Rules Committee is comprised of elected members from across the state. So it's a democratically elected group chartered with doing things like writing convention rules. There was we are eternally grateful for the time that the special committee spent on it, and we are sorry that that they had not been incorporated into a committee within the Rules Committee, but that was the decision of the then former chair on how she proceeded. Then who did approve the plan? So they convened the executive committee of the Democratic Party of Oregon, which is permitted in the bylaws for emergencies only. And then they ran the meeting by electronic, which is also something only allowed for emergencies. The approval of the delegate selection plan was something that they've known about since last year. They received the guidelines at the end of 2018, and they've had at least since the beginning of the year to get this done and arrange a meeting of the State Central Committee. So, and that plus the fact that they could give a 20-day notice for the executive committee kind of discounts it being an emergency. The other thing that didn't sit well with people was that the plan was put out for public review as the DNC Rules Committee stipulated on April 1st, and they had a month to collect information. They said that they received feedback from 78 people, and I know I submitted what amounted to 13 pages of comments on their tool, but none of the feedback caused anything to be changed other than corrections. So they stayed with the plan as it had been written for all intents and purposes. So what was wrong with the plan? Apart from the who authored it, there were two primary things that were objectionable. The plan called for plurality voting. And this is a form of voting which Robert's Rules of Order says a plurality vote is not a majority, never elects anyone to office except by virtue of a special rule previously adopted. If such a rule is to apply to the election of officers, it must be prescribed in the bylaws. So that's what our rules of order say. And then I have some comments later also on what's wrong with plurality voting. The other thing that had been included in the plan, which is not sitting well with a lot of people in Eastern Oregon, because what they called for was what is known as a hybrid meeting, where people can attend in person, but also others can attend electronically. We totally empathize with the second CD because the distances for the second CD are enormous. It's the 7th largest congressional district in the United States. But again, this is an event that happens once every 4 years. And there are people that are willing to make those distances to meet. The problem is that it's going to be potentially a very complex delegates selection convention, especially if there's as many as 3 candidates voting for. That means that there's going to be 3 caucuses run at the convention, and there has to be a way for people to be credentialed and verify that they actually should be voting. And then should be a process for voting that is secure, because this is all about selecting who gets sent to the convention in 2020. And we've never done remote meetings well so far. And this is hardly the time to be doing an experiment. There were some other actions done during the day, which is why people should be really excited about what's happening within the Democratic Party of Oregon. Instead of people just taking orders blindly and following the leadership, they're actually functioning as the entities that they are. Today we have Farah Chaichi joining us, who attended the Credentials Committee meeting. Farah, welcome.
Hi.
Tell us what happened in the Credentials Committee. This is usually a pretty sleepy committee, but this one was different.
Yeah, so we showed up. I'm not really a member, but I didn't have anywhere to be that morning. So we showed up, and there was some introductions of the members, and then there was some discussion about who was actually a voting member, and the committee was told that it didn't really matter, that there hadn't been a vote in that committee for a very long time, possibly years. And so they didn't have to worry about credentialing the Credentials Committee members. There was actually someone, it was either the chair or the former chair, who said that they're a working committee and they don't actually take votes. So they're just there to produce labor. And one of the other members from Washington County said that they intend to make a motion, so they want to know who is an actual member. So that discussion was had. I don't know that they actually made an official list or an actual official credential, like you are credentialed, you are not credentialed, but they figured it out because there were 9 people in the room. The first motion that was made was to remove the credentials from the caucus chairs who had not submitted a report to the executive committee by the end of the first quarter. And there was a lot of discussion about, well, the reports eventually came in, so they're compliant. And the staff of the DPO said that there's no actual definition of what constitutes a report. So how can you say that they didn't turn in a report when most of the caucuses provided oral reports at the SCC? Yeah.
That's problematic.
Yeah. Yes. And they really relied on the fact that eventually those reports had been turned in, and so that means that they are in compliance. A member from, I think, Tillamook County pointed out, because the staff said, our regular parliamentarian said that we could only have the committee report to remove credentials. They don't have the authority to remove credentials themselves, and that the the county member from Tillamook said that the committee shouldn't, it's weird to give them credentials if they are not compliant and then have them on the floor of the SCC discussing and voting on whether or not to remove their own credentials, which I thought was a really excellent point that did not seem to make a difference. Eventually, the new chair, Bing Wong, I think, tried to rule that motion out of order because he had not received a report about who was in compliance with that report requirement. And they appealed the ruling of the chair, and the appeal won, but the motion failed. So the caucus chairs or delegates who didn't submit reports were going to be credentialed anyway. The second motion that came out was to nullify the business of the executive committee from May 2nd for being improperly credentialed. None of the committee members apparently had been informed that that meeting was happening, so they weren't there to credential. The former chair of the credentials committee, Berlene Riley, said she was on the call, but she had delegated the responsibility of credentialing to DPO staffer Candy Emmons because of the technical aspects of the credentialing. As you mentioned, it was an electronic meeting. And the member who made the motion wanted to nullify it because under Roberts, if you don't have a properly credentialed meeting, you can nullify results. So there was a very long discussion about that. Eventually, it's a motion to recommend to the SCC to nullify, so that would have to be a part of their report to the SCC, which we never received as the SCC, considering how long the censure vote took. So hopefully that's coming in our next part of this meeting. They also moved and passed a motion to audit the credentials of the executive committee because part of the way that the past chair was trying to assuage everyone's concerns was by saying that the method that they used is auditable. So committee wants to see that, which was a great move on the Marion County members' part. And then there was also a motion to deny the chair the authority to delegate that responsibility for credentialing to staff. So during the course of this discussion, the appointed parliamentarian for the weekend, not a normal person, had come into the room at the behest of Brad Martin, the executive director, and she said that technically the committee would authorize the chair to give out the responsibility, to be able to delegate the responsibility to staff, and the committee hadn't done that. But there are considerations that you have to have for custom, and so at this point, the custom is falling to the ground because somebody is challenging it and it's not in the rules, against the rule. So somebody made a motion to deny the chair the authority to delegate, just so it was crystal clear that the committee wants to keep its own responsibilities and duties for itself. And during that discussion, the former chair, Carlene, said she found out she was able to vote. So on the committee, you have a chair and a vice chair, and those are appointed by the DPO chair. The DPO chair can also appoint a voting member. Well, it was Carlene's intention that she vote now because that's what Casey, the DPO chair, had told her she was allowed to do. There was a lot of discussion about who was and was not allowed to vote. And the DPO chair said she just had a miscommunication that Carlene had been able to vote the whole time. It was not a new appointment. It was an appointment that happened earlier in the week for this meeting, but that she didn't clearly communicate that Carlene was going to be able to vote. So at this point, I think we had like 5 minutes left in the meeting, and they were still on that motion to deny the chair the authority to delegate their responsibilities. And a member from Washington County made a motion to adjourn because they figured, well, we're almost out of time, and we've already sort of handled this idea that we don't want our authority delegated out based on the previous motions. I don't know if I mentioned, but they also voted to make sure that the committee is apprised of all executive committee meetings, just like they are of SCC meetings, so they have the opportunity to credential it. In the middle of the motion to adjourn, they started discussing again who was and was not able to vote because there was, it was ridiculous. So the miscommunication was that Carlene could vote, but that she didn't know she could vote. And at some point, the appointed parliamentarian said that the chair of the committee can also vote. So there was a discussion of the bylaws, which are ambiguous, and the parliamentarian said we'd have to vote to figure out how to clarify that ambiguity. But that vote never happened. That will probably be a discussion for a later date. But the motion to adjourn was on the table, and there was a tie. The acting chair, who was also the current vice chair, because the current appointed chair didn't feel up to it that weekend to deal with the meeting themselves. And the parliamentarian said, because there was a tie anyway, that it didn't matter if the acting chair voted, because it was a tie, it would fail anyway. So they move on, and immediately after they dispose of the motion to adjourn, Carlene says, I want to go back to that vote about the recommending to the SCC. Yes. She said that I want to go back to that vote, revisit it, and at first it was a motion to reconsider, but the member from Washington County said you can't have a motion to reconsider come from anyone except a person who voted on the prevailing side, so that, you know, people aren't being dilatory. And the acting chair and parliamentarian said it was something like a continuing breach. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes and I don't know if I wrote that down, but there's a continuing breach, not considered a reconsideration, because the member, Carlene, had been disenfranchised from voting. But she wasn't disenfranchised, she just didn't know she could vote. It wasn't that anyone was preventing her or stopping her from voting. It was the miscommunication that stopped her from voting. So eventually the acting chair said, you know, I'm going to rule this motion from Carlene out of order. So the vote stands. They are supposed to recommend to the SCC to nullify the business of the executive committee of meeting of May 2nd.
So although this sounds deep in the weeds of Robert's Rules of Order, for those of you who are listening to this, then this is an example of how Robert's Rules protects the members from overbearing chairs or, you know, just taking orders from people blindly. We in the 1st Congressional District elected 2 people to this committee, and as chair of the 1st Congressional District, I expect those people to attend meetings and make motions and ensure that credentialing is done properly. And this is the first time I've heard of the Credentials Committee members actually standing up and asserting their rights. So this is all very cool. And this is another reason why everyone should be excited about what's happening within the Democratic Party of Oregon. People are ensuring that things are being done. And the whole discussion about the caucus votes is really important, because there are now 17 caucuses, which is roughly 10% of the total number of voting members of the State Central Committee. So it's a large vote of people. The bylaws are very clear about the distinction between an active and an inactive committee. And not only do they have to submit a report, they also have to have at least 30 active members. They have to have met twice, and they needed to have done something in the previous year, which is a really low bar. Those are also supposed to be put in the report. We keep being told that the caucus liaison is taking care of this, but that is actually not an official position. The only people that can deal with credentialing is the Credentials Committee and the Executive Committee, which is given oversight of the caucuses. And so I guess to be continued on the status of them. So now someone has to review the reports and see if they've actually done what they were supposed to do to be active. So thank you for going to that and taking notes, Farah. That's awesome.
No problem.
Yay. I just want to jump in and say, holy shit, that's amazing. That's just amazing. And that is the Jedi stuff that I dreamed of happening in our democracy. So thank you so much. Carry on.
Yeah, and I don't see a question. I don't see a question, but Suzanne O'Shea says, my head is spinning. I'm so appreciative that you all are able to keep the meeting in order and challenge inappropriate procedures. They need to be addressed, and it probably won't be the last time. And I say ditto.
Yes, for everyone who's walked away from the Democratic Party because they were irritated at how things have been conducted, what is happening is that we are turning things around, and we really wish you would come back. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this meeting on things that could be next steps. The next thing to talk about is what happened in the Elections Integrity Caucus. So this is one of our 17 caucuses. The actions that they took are some of the most comprehensive and studious actions I've seen from a caucus. They met and they approved 3 motions when they met on Sunday. The first motion was to have the DPO Best Election Integrity Practices Subcommittee within the Election Integrity Caucus ensure that our own party meets or surpasses the election integrity best practices we advocate for the general elections. So they first said, we want to be involved ensuring that our own house is in order when we do elections. The second one was that the same people be included in all meetings and discussions of the Rules Committee, all work groups, and all subcommittees working on the delegate selection plan. So interestingly, the delegate selection committee had hours-long discussion about plurality versus majority vote, but had never brought anyone from the Elections Integrity Caucus to discuss that. So they're saying they want to be at the table when this goes forward. And then the third motion they approved was that they will be moving to amend the delegate selection plan by striking plurality and inserting that with majority at the continuation of the meeting that we had on Sunday. So that motion will be coming from the caucus as opposed to just from someone from the floor. So awesome work, Elections Integrity Caucus. This was really exciting work that you did.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
So a couple things. First of all, Farrah, you can split if you want. You don't have to hang out, or you can hang out. But you're done. Thanks.
I'll hang.
Awesome, cool. And Larry, talk about why there's going to be a continuation of the meeting, because that to me was one of the coolest things.
Oh, people using tools never used before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that we've had numerous discussions on Progressive Oregon about learning Robert's Rules of Order and getting people trained in the material so that people understand their tools so they can stand up for their rights. And so what happened as we hit the 6 o'clock hour, we knew that we were coming upon 6:30. We did not want the meeting to adjourn without continuing with the work that has to occur. And so someone moved to a motion for an adjourned meeting, which is the Robert's Rules lingo for when this meeting adjourns, it will continue on when we reconvene instead of just ending. So all the work that was on the agenda for the balance of the meeting will be worked on when we reconvene next. So that's something that I've never seen done before in a meeting. So it was very cool to see.
Am I wrong in thinking that there's also a timeline, like it has to be done in 30 days?
Well, that was part of the motion. So yeah.
Motion. Okay.
And there was a lot of discussion about that. And, there's lots of people who don't understand these motions, which is why it takes much longer to get these things considered. But yeah, that was ended up being part of the motion.
Well, so this last weekend practicing democracy was clunky because it was riding a bike for the first time. But the next time it's going to be a lot easier.
It's going to get better.
Yeah. Awesomeness. Carry on.
So I wanted to go back to plurality voting because there were some things that the Elections Integrity Caucus brought up that were really cool. The first item, well, the most interesting one was Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually weighed in on plurality voting. And what she said in a book called The Bias of At-Large Elections, How It Works, the oldest trick in the book, she said, at-large block voting, also known as plurality at-large voting method, has been called the oldest trick in the book. Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg cited this method along with racial gerrymandering as a preeminent second-generation way to deny equal opportunity for minority voters and candidates. So that's RBG. The main thing about that is objectionable about plurality voting is that it produces different results than if you have a majority vote. And we actually had an example of that at the meeting on Sunday. So one of the pieces of business that had to be done was the election of at-large delegates to the executive committee. We broke up into our 3 regions. I was in Region 2, and we had to elect 2 delegates. And the rule stated that we had to do it by majority vote. So the first slide on round 1 voting shows the result of the first round. If you bring up that slide. So there were 51 people voting. That meant that you had 26 votes to win. On the first round of voting, we had 5 candidates. And Karina Perez Europa was elected with 37 votes. We all love Karina. Then we had the other 4 candidates. The second candidate had 22 votes. The third candidate had 21 votes. The fourth candidate had 14, and the fifth candidate had 5. If we had been doing plurality voting, the candidate number 2 would have won because she got the next highest number of votes, even though it wasn't a majority. And then, why we don't like this is because you get a number of popular candidates and they end up vote splitting, which means that you could possibly elect someone that the majority really didn't want. So then we went to the second round of voting. Again, it was 26 votes to win. Candidate number 2 got 20 votes this time. Carrie Capon got 22 votes, and then candidate number 3 got 8 votes. And so again, Carrie and candidate number 3 split votes, which kept them under the 26 vote requirement. So then we went to a third round of voting. And again, 26 votes to win. Candidate number 2 got 25 votes, and Carrie Capon got 26 votes. So Carrie Capon got the majority, and she was the winner. And a majority got to pick who's going to be the second at-large member of the executive. So again, this is just one small microcosm, but it was interesting to see the difference between plurality voting and majority vote play out during the meeting as a prime example of why we don't like plurality voting. And again, the 2020 convention is not like 2012, where we had one candidate, Barack Obama. Didn't matter who went to the convention, he was going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. 2016, we went into the convention with Hillary Clinton having a majority. So again, there was no wiggle room for anything else to happen. She had a majority of delegates, and so she won the nomination. 2020, however, could be quite different. It is possible that 3 candidates could emerge, of which none have a majority, and we go into the convention where people will be voting of their own free will, and after the first vote, they will not be bound. So it could potentially be a very, very important convention, and it's not the place for convention tourists, which is what we could end up with plurality voting. So that was it for the meeting that we had last Sunday on the 19th. Very painful. People went away very, very frustrated. I totally empathize with them. But there was a group of people who felt it was very important that we start cleaning up the behavior of the party so that we don't attack and harass people for being whistleblowers. I do want to go through the bylaws, rules, and violations because these are what has been taken away from you by the actions of the DPO leadership. There was a comment that Trevor Noah made a couple of weeks ago when he was discussing Attorney General Barr's testimony. And Trevor Noah said, "America, I feel like I've discovered a fundamental flaw in your democracy. You have no defense against someone being just being a dick," which is true. We don't have the Secretary of State to go to when people violate the rules. We can't call up the police and say our rules are being violated. We can't go to the Attorney General. There's really nobody to police this other than ourselves, which is why it's so important for people to understand the rules. But we appreciate the work that the special committee did. They did put in a lot of work on that. Again, it was unfortunate that they were not incorporated into the Rules Committee. But what I want to go through is how the bylaws and rules were violated. You know, you can argue this until the cows come home that this is the way we've always done it. But if the rules say something different, then you've always done it wrong. So the executive committee was used to approve the delegate selection plan instead of the state central committee, even though there was no emergency and there were months available to schedule the state central committee to meet. The executive committee was conducted electronically, which also was only allowed in emergencies. So the violation here is that artificially created emergency prevented the state central committee from debating and amending the delegate selection process. Again, a special committee was appointed that performed a task that falls within the assigned function of the Rules Committee. There's a reason why this is not allowed by our parliamentary procedure. It's so that the presiding officer in an organization, the chair, cannot ignore something that is tasked to a standing committee because she doesn't like the committee. I do not know why the chair chose to do this. The Rules Committee had established a subcommittee to work on this stuff in Q3 of 2018. The chair of the subcommittee had contacted the DPO chair numerous times for the delegate selection plan, thinking that it would arrive any day. She never received the delegate selection plan officially, and we ended up getting the plan indirectly from a website who had posted the work of the DNC Rules Committee. And the reason why this is important, and I've said this previously, the Rules Committee is comprised of people elected from across the state. These are elected people that represent the delegates of the county committees and the county CD committees. These are elected people that were chosen by Democrats to do this work, and so if it falls within their assigned tasks, then they should be allowed to do that work. Non-members were appointed. This ends up being a nit, but this is just another violation. There were non-members of the State Central Committee appointed to the special committee that were not approved by the State Central Committee. And because the creation of the special committee that did all of this work on delegate selection rules was never properly noted in a meeting, that is the opportunity for us to actually bring this up and object to it and correct it if the State Central Committee feels that this is improper to be done. We have been told that this was done, but I listened intently, as did a few others, to every report that the chair had made. And other than a passing reference to a affirmative action committee, I do not recall anything, and there is nothing in the minutes. So, and we've also not found a delegate who remembers this being said. So for all intents and purposes, it wasn't mentioned. Even, you know, I have no idea what they're talking about when they said that the chair mentioned this. But again, we've not had an opportunity to comment on this. Our first opportunity is going to be at the continuation of the meeting last Sunday. It appears that non-members of the executive committee voted during that meeting. We didn't have an announcement officially of who the attendees were that evening. There were 34 people on the line. I do know that one non-member was announced as representing one of the congressional districts, but they were also not listed in the minutes, which you wouldn't do. You don't generally list guests to the meeting. So we don't know who was actually voting with confidence. And then finally, the system called Maestro, which is used for conference calls, was also used for voting. It is not a system approved by the bylaws, which is a violation of the rules. This has become another custom which needs to fall to the ground because we're calling this as being invalid. We know that there were votes cast that the Maestro system did not record. It is not a very sophisticated piece of technology. If you're supposed to vote on your phone that you dialed into the meeting on, there is no visual component to the meeting. It's all audio. Electronic meetings are really difficult to conduct. We tried passing rules for electronic meetings, but they were referred back to the committee because they weren't perfect enough. But ultimately, we know that there were votes cast that were not counted, and so we don't know if the delegate selection plan was actually receiving enough votes to be approved, which is why it's great that the Credentials Committee has weighed in on this and has declared the vote invalid, and so we will be able to bring this up at the continuation of the State Central Committee. Any comments from the line, Betsy?
Yeah, Suzanne O'Shea said, isn't this one of the items on the agenda for our second meeting that is supposed to take place within 30 days? Have you heard anything about when this meeting will take place?
We've not heard anything about the meeting. We would really like the meeting to be a physical meeting. Regarding this being brought up, so the place where it should be addressed is during the report of the chair. So the chair has to report on the actions of the executive committee, and then during that report, we can say point of order, and then continue on there with amendments to the plan. It's going to require everyone to be on their game and defending our rights to do this.
It's not a question, but a comment from Joe Tomlin that actually I have the question about is this notes issue is absurd. It is in the basic responsibilities of the secretary to record all motion amendments and announcements. So my question is, how come that, I mean, how is that accountability made?
Well, that's a really good point. So our prior secretary did not take notes properly. If you read Robert's Rules of Order, what you really need is the text of the motion and like Joe said, how things were handled so that people can read the minutes and see procedurally how things were done. I brought this up 4 years ago, and I was told by the then rules chair and parliamentarian that our minutes are not the congressional record and we just aren't going to do that. And the secretary at that time took that direction and didn't. So if you look at our older minutes, there were like rephrasings of motions, but not the wording of motions. And really it's the wording of motions that's most important because the secretary can get it incorrect. There is a procedure for making motions, which no one followed on Sunday. And if people would actually conduct motions properly, much of the confusion of what went on would have been eliminated. The chair needs to state the motion before it is voted on. And the motion has to be what was moved earlier by the member of the assembly. The words have to match and it has to be clear. And the secretary has to record it. I am confident that our current secretary will be doing things properly. We've had discussions about this and love her. She's great. I think that the next set of minutes we're going to have clarity on how motions are stated that we've never seen before. Anything else?
No, I don't see any other questions.
This just incredible. There's a person on YouTube who made a comment about this whole thing yesterday, and they were very upset, and they said, please explain to me what substantive problems there are with the DSP plan. And I said, well, not following the rules. If you don't think that's substantive, then I don't know. You don't know what that word means, right? And everybody's in. It seems like all these stories are to do with, well, we're not going to follow the rules. That's what you were told 4 years ago. We're not going to follow the rules, Larry. Right? Yeah. And it's just amazing. What happens when you follow the rules? Democracy kind of works. Yeah.
I guess there is another part to Joe's comment. So it is the responsibility of everyone sitting in the assembly to review the minutes and make comments. And this is at the beginning of the meeting, and it's the most boring part. And people don't typically read the minutes to make sure that they're accurate and complete. It's hard to do if you're just being given a written copy at the beginning of the meeting and you're trying to remember what happened 3 months ago. But that is the process, and it's the responsibility of everyone to review the minutes and make sure that they accurately reflect what happened at the meeting. When you get pages and pages of people's comments, all you can do then at that point is refer it back to the secretary for revision. But the minutes were so poorly written that it just was too much of an uphill battle. So again, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that the minutes are accurate. There is no time limit on correcting minutes. So if we do not like something that happened 2 quarters ago, we can bring that up and get it corrected. But then again, you're starting to rely on people's memories and to get it right. And so that's where that sits. Anything else?
I just have a question about whether they audio record these meetings, so there is a reference to what actually happened.
Yes, there's someone filming these meetings. We have people that have requested the files, and but no one has ever been given one in the past when requested. We are hoping that they will honor those requests. We would love to see how the former chair had presented the delegate selection committee to the state central committee and how I missed it. I would really like to know that. And it is possible that, I was not paying attention and missed it, but that is something that I want to hear. And I want to hear how it was done as well, because I was listening for it. So yes, they allegedly exist. We also have the video recordings of most of the meeting at advancementofdemocracy.org. So if you want to see what happened in the last meeting, it's sitting out there. So I want to dispel a couple of myths that keep bouncing around the state of Oregon, and it has to do with me and my role. The first myth was that I orchestrated the censure of the DPO chair. I had nothing to do with the censure, although I enormously appreciate the group that worked to pass the motion and spoke for it and fought for it during the meeting. I actually had nothing to do with it. My number one goal in being at the State Central Committee was to try and amend the delegate selection plan to make these corrections. The second myth is that I command an army of followers who sabotage the Democratic Party and infiltrate the standing committees. I do not command an army of anyone. This is a leaderless group of people who want to see reform within the Democratic Party of Oregon, and there is no leader. And it certainly isn't me. I have no army. Next myth: I hold a grudge against something. So this was made inappropriately during the debate about the motion to censure the chair. Someone called me out specifically and said I held a grudge. I actually voted for the DPO chair, and I believe that she had matured and would work to unify the party. The main reason why I voted for her is because she had been chair of Multnomah County Democrats and had actual experience as being a chair of a group which the previous 3 chairs did not have. But what I am doing is I'm monitoring the actions of the Democratic Party of Oregon and of the DNC because of what happened in 2016. There was another myth that I was happy over what happened at the State Central Committee meeting. So someone leaned over to me and said, after it was all over, I hope you're happy. So no, I wasn't happy that we had to spend that time censoring the chair. I drove 5.5 hours from Astoria to work on the amending of the delegate selection plan to eliminate the plurality voting and the hybrid meeting, and we didn't get to that. I was also one of the people that drove over on Saturday and had to stay overnight. So it was a big investment of time, and I didn't achieve what I went to do there. Top shocking moments.
Hang on, you didn't name all the things you did, Larry. I just want to, what Larry did do was produce weekly programs that inform the electorate, and members of the electorate use that information to take back control of the party. That is what Larry did. But he did it with a small group of people that just use the rules. That's all. That's all. There you go. Carry on.
So, top shocking moments. A delegate had been called a dumbass bitch during the debate on bullying, which is just so ironic. I can't believe it. This is inappropriate behavior, which the chair has to watch out for and call out of order. Another delegate had been told to go back to the Republican Party. Jamie McLeod Skinner came up to me about 2/3 of the way through the debate on the censure motion, and she told me that I must be enjoying this meeting and that I could stop the debate if I wanted to. Again, I don't control anybody, and I don't think I could have stopped it. And so I didn't. Again, this is kind of a top-down mentality that we see coming from people that is a little bit disturbing. I don't command anyone. We don't have a hierarchy. Everyone is an equal delegate at the State Central Committee acting on their own behalf. The other thing was using good of the order in the Rules Committee to attack me. This was actually pretty funny. We saw the agenda that the chair of the Rules Committee had published, and it had good of the order at the bottom, and I thought, well, what a positive thing to add. We can all join hands and end the meeting on a positive note. But it turned out that this was his opportunity to accuse me of publishing a story about what had been going on. So after he said that I had done this, and I actually don't really know what the sin is that I allegedly committed, but so it gave me an opportunity to explain what's going on. I had written up a story that talked about everything that I talked about today, about how the special committee had been set up and how we had been, the work of that committee had been misrepresented at the prior Rules Committee meeting. And I put it in a Google Drive folder and had shared it with a couple of my friends. One of them had taken that and had put it on Facebook, and it turned out, and this was also revealed in the meeting that the chair had brought up, that it wasn't posted in a public Facebook account. It had been put on a private Facebook group, which means that another member of the group had to actually copy that and then distribute it. So whoever released it was not me or the person who put it in the private group, but it was whoever the person was that then took that, and the next place that we know of it landing is the former DPO chair, because she then took it to Facebook and put a public notice about, going on about all the good work of the special committee and why she did what she did. So as far as I know, it was the former DPO chair who actually released this. And so if they want to go after someone, then they should go after her. But yeah, it was very interesting having good of the order used to attack me. So finally, what can we do about the delegate selection plan next? The plan is, in its current state, was submitted to the Democratic National Committee Rules Committee on May 3rd. As I said before, the Elections Integrity Caucus and other State Central Committee delegates will propose amendments at the next meeting, which is a continuance of the meeting from 5/19. The DNC Rules Committee could, in their review of the plan, return it to Oregon for changes. And the DPO chair said at the beginning of the meeting on Sunday that this would be handled by the Rules Committee. There's language inside the plan that says that any subsequent changes will be done by the DPO chair. She says that she will turn it over to the Rules Committee, and I take her at her word. The plan itself is not finalized until September. So in theory, there is an opportunity to amend the plan and resubmit it to the Rules Committee in its revised form. Finally, how can the Democratic Party become united? Clearly, it was a very disappointing meeting for everyone. Many people walked away very irritated because there was no business passed at the meeting. That was why they traveled so far to get there. So I have 4 recommendations. Number 1, follow the rules. We either need to follow the rules or stop pretending and wasting everyone's time. Pretending to follow the rules is not following the rules. Number 2, stop the character assassination and harassment. And it's shocking that it really has to be said, but this is a cultural behavior within the Democratic Party of Oregon leadership that has to stop. We need to let the State Central Committee be the governing body that it is supposed to be. So what I would really like to see is some of these decisions that are made in like in the admin committee or not even in any committee, actually run by the State Central Committee. And if there are a decision made offhand, then the State Central Committee should have an opportunity to then call point of order on them and have the body review them. And then finally, we need to treat everyone equitably, fairly, and professionally. And, you know, the behavior of the leadership really sets the tone for the organization. And I think that's why we have behavior like calling people dumbass bitches inside the meeting itself, because that is the tone that's being set by the leadership. So the tone has to be changed. And finally, what you can do. So if you are a Democrat who's not involved in the party, and you're shocked at what is going on and you think your party needs to be run better, you can always join your county's organization. You can find out how to contact your county's organization by going to the Democratic Party of Oregon website, which is www.dpo.org. Under counties, they list the county chairs and their phone number, and you should be able to call them up and find out when their next meeting is and start attending. You need to hold your elected Democratic Party officials accountable. So everyone who, you know, the reason why we have these violations of the laws is that no one is stepping up and calling the leadership on it. Even if they are violating the laws inadvertently, when these things are pointed up, there is no such thing as precedent in what we did before. If they are violating the rules, then what they're doing are then called customs. And as Farah mentioned earlier, the customs fall to the ground and we go back to following the rules. You need to tell them that you want your Democratic Party to adhere to the rules and processes. You need to tell this to your county leadership and your county delegates to the State Central Committee so that they know how to behave at the State Central Committee meeting themselves. I'm just a little horrified at the number of people who think that it's the messenger delivering the news about the violation of the rules as being the problem. The problem is that the Democratic Party of Oregon is not following the rules. And then finally, in the beginning of next year, you can become a precinct committee person and involve yourself in the party matters. You can run for any of the offices. We encourage you to get involved and help us finish the job of cleaning things up. Any final comments, Betsy?
Well, Schultze 100, I agree with. Do adults really talk that way? Good God. You know, that kind of thing is really kind of disconcerting for people who don't really want to get into the minutia of the party. But let's say that somebody doesn't want to be a PCP. Is there something written that, like on the webpage, something simple they can write and send, you know, to people at the PCP? Do you have a resolution that parties can pass at the local level to send to the SCC to say, follow the rules? Is anything like that going on?
No, usually you don't have to pass resolutions to tell people to follow the rules. Usually if you call them on it, they should do it. Although now that you've mentioned it, maybe that's something that we should do. What can you do if you are not a precinct committee person? Well, you can always contact the Democratic Party leadership. Their contact information is on the DPO website, and you can email them and let them know how you feel about how things are being handled. You can call up the Democratic Party of Oregon itself. They're easily found. You just Google well, our contact information is on their website. You can call up and leave messages on how you want things to be done. If enough Democrats demand change, then change will finally happen. Anything else?
I think we're good. Well done. Are we doing grievance process this?
Yes, we are. We're talking about the grievance process. So people have endured harassment and not spoken up. And so we want you to know that we have set up a place to log incidents of harassment and character assassination. It's on PDPO, so it's like the Progressive Democratic Party of Oregon. So pdp.org has a way to record incidents of harassment. If you're being called a racist, if you are being told to do things that by people who are not authorized to do things, if you are being yelled at by members of the Democratic Party of Oregon, and you don't know what to do, you are more than welcome to report these incidents, and we will have a discussion with either the county organization or the Democratic Party of Oregon on what is reported, and we will get back to you on how you can remedy these things on your own. So please go to pdpo.org and report your incidents, and we will help you out. If you would like to learn about Robert's Rules of Order and how you can assert your rights, we have a number of videos that are on a website called advancementofdemocracy.org. This is also where we have the videos from the Q2 2019 State Central Committee meeting, so you can actually see how the meeting was run and what transpired. And I don't want you to watch these and become horrified, because things can be changed and things can be run better. There's actually just a couple of tweaks that needs to be made to the meetings that would have eliminated a couple of hours of wasted time. We just need to inform our presiding officers of what those are, and those problems will be addressed. If you would like to join a parliamentary study group, there's a new website called parliamentarytalk.org. There's a button on there for joining the virtual study group that we have set up in Oregon. We are a chartered group within the National Association of Parliamentarians. We can take you as far as you would like to go. You know, the basic membership is just being a provisional member. You can become a full member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. You can study to become a registered parliamentarian, and then we can help you become a professional registered parliamentarian. And it's really by becoming a registered parliamentarian or better that you start understanding how all of these rules work together, and you understand the philosophy behind democracy, so that these things start becoming more apparent to you, and you can sense when your rules are being violated. We will be starting parliamentarytalk.org, which is going to be a live stream broadcast sometime in June. And what we will do is we take people's challenges that they've encountered, like in their neighborhood association meeting or in their homeowners association or in their sorority or fraternity or whatever organization they belong to that is run as a democratic assembly. And we will take those challenges and explain to them how to overcome them. So we will tell you the tools that you have available to you to assert your rights.
I want to drop in right now and just say, so if you go to your meetings and you have people running meetings horribly, record it and send it to us, info@uphillmedia.org, or get in touch with us on social media, so that we will use your clips so that we can talk about them and tell you what to do. So please, we need a catalog, and there's lots of them out there, I know.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yes.
Yeah, you can talk about this till you're blue in the face, but until you see these things in action, that's when the reality actually sets in. If you'd like to receive notices of these shows, you can go to Advancement of Democracy and click the receive notifications buttons, and then we will let you know when these shows are coming up and what the topics will be. And again, you can join Advancement of Democracy, which is actually people that are working together to change things. We would love to have your input. Finally, donations. Uphill Media is solely run on contributions, And if you like these shows and you think they're valuable, we don't need a lot. We follow the Bernie Sanders models of taking many small contributions. I would say our average contribution size is about $5. So if you could spare $5 a month, we would be delighted if you would throw that our way. And you can do that at donate.uphillmedia.com. And that's our show for today, John.
Awesome. That was well done. Thank you, Larry. And yeah, this was great. Thank you, Farah. Thank you, everybody, for doing
Thank you, guys.
And it just, I'm very excited about democracy in Oregon right now. That this has been, well, 2 years really in my mind of hard work from really a small bunch of people with a lot of adversity. So thank you all for what you've done. Everybody in the SCC, every Democrat that was working on this and wanting to see it work well. The next meeting should be even better because everybody practiced good democracy, I think, by the end of the weekend, from what I understand. So.
Oh yeah, and everyone is now running around with their mobile device, looking up Robert's Rules of Order on the internet.
Good, because that's how democracy functions. It's following the rules would seem to be like a basic tenet of making democracy work. It's the problem we have at the top. It's a problem we have at the bottom. But we can affect change here, which is what we've done. I can't change Tom Perez. I can't change Nancy Pelosi yet, but I can certainly change what's going on in my state with Larry and with the help of a few friends. It's really awesome. Imagine what we could do if we all just, everybody, right? So we're going to go out of here in honor of Assange, who shouldn't be tried for stupid things because he's a publisher. And I expect all of my Democrats to be standing up loud and proud about that. This is our 2020 version of The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, the Bernie Sanders remix. And it includes some quotes by Mike Gravel because they really pertain to what's going on today with Julian Assange. And I really want to just props to Ron Wyden for actually standing up and being one of the three Democrats that stood up and publicly said this is bullshit and we shouldn't be charging Assange. So thank you, Ron, Warren, and Bernie. That's it. Here we go. Thank you, everybody. Go practice democracy.
And I repeat again, what's wrong with this nation and what's at issue at this particular point in our history is not the fact that the American people have lost faith and trust in its leaders, but the very simple fact that over the last 20 years, up to today, the American leadership has not demonstrated, has not had the faith and trust in the American people. And had that faith and trust and straightforwardness been present, this nation would not be in the mess it's in today.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres,
Beverly Hillbillies and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry armed women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning.
We can return this system of government to the town meeting, the process where everybody gets involved, where the people who make policy are the people who suffer policy. That's a very important facet.
The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
The idea that resistance would be reduced to a hashtag is very offensive to me.